Chapter 1401. Tao Divinity Shadow Dissension Rune. You can call me Sect Elder Mu. I am in charge of the 11th line in Seven Moons Sect, Mu Zhen. The ancient voice said. The old man's expression was calm when he took a slow step towards Su Ming. There was no shadow beneath him. It was just as he said, the one who appeared was just a shadow figure. Seven Lives Art is a cultivation method only the successor disciples in Seven Moons Sect can practice. But in truth, the goal of this art is to gather together Tao's shadow, Tao's figure. When the old man said those words flatly, he looked at Su Ming. And Tao's shadow is not something you can understand with your current potential. Sect Elder Wang, you aren't my opponent. I would advise you to give up. The old man had a calm expression, but there was a hint of arrogance in his words, and it lingered in the air, allowing all those who heard him to be able to hear it clearly. His arrogance might seem normal to the disciples of Seven Moons Disciple, and they would not feel anything because of it, but when it came to Su Ming, he frowned. Since you are a sect elder as well, I do not want to humiliate you too much. I do it for Sect Elder Lan too. Oh well, I will take the initiative and make the decision. I will not return your attacks. You have 3 chances to attack. As long as you can make me take half a step back, you will be considered to have cleared the formation. But Sect Elder Wang, this will only happen once. If you continue to attempt clearing the 13th formation, don't blame me for being ruthless. From the moment the white-robed old man appeared, he spoke as if he was talking to himself. Each of his words gave others a feeling that he stood supreme above others. His final words also showed incredible arrogance. Su Ming was originally frowning, but at that moment, the frown disappeared from his face. The ghost of a smile appeared in its place. When he cast a glance at the old man, he said, "Then I will have to thank you, Sect Elder Mu. I will obey you." "Ah, you prepared?" "I will not need to prepare myself. You can attack at any time you please," the old man said flatly. His expression might have been calm and gentle, but the pride in his voice remained. In truth, he did indeed have a reason to be proud. With his real body, he had reached the 2nd level of Tao Divinity Realm. Even his shadow figure had the power of those in the later stage of Avacania Realm. His noble status of a sect elder in Seven Moons Sect turned his prideful actions into a habit. He was familiar with his own demeanor, and he did not feel even the slightest bit of discomfort behaving in such a way. Su Ming nodded and swiftly moved forward. When he lifted his right hand, he did not clench his fist. Instead, when he approached, he pointed at Sect Elder Mu. At the instant he did so, the pupils of the white-robed old man shrank, but by then, Su Ming's finger had already touched the air 7 inches away from the white-robed old man. An arch-shaped barrier instantly appeared to block Su Ming's finger. The barrier fluctuated as if it was continuously neutralizing the attack. The old man's pupils, originally shrunken, returned to normal. He smiled faintly, but just as he was about to speak, the barrier crumbled, and Su Ming's right hand shot forward. He tapped the old man's arm. "Go away," Su Ming said faintly. Since he intended to clear the formations, he did not intend to keep too much of his power a secret. Instead, he wanted to show it bit by bit. At that moment, one of his assumptions had been proved right. It was the one about what sort of things had been going on with the great sect elder of the 3rd line, the middle-aged man in the sky-blue daoist robe, taking Su Ming in as a disciple, causing him to become the 14th sect elder of Seven Moons Sect. The white-robed old man's expression changed drastically. He instinctively wanted to move back, but he forced himself not to do so. His body distorted as if he was about to dissipate, and he could not endure the power from Su Ming's finger. He could not help staggering and taking dozens of footsteps backwards. When he stopped with much difficulty, his expression changed continuously. It was occasionally sullen, occasionally aloof, occasionally shocked. When he looked at Su Ming, there was a complicated expression in his gaze. In the end, he did not say another word and turned around. With a swing of his arm, he disappeared from the feng shui compass. At that moment, all those who saw the proceedings from the different layers of sky beyond the sky in Seven Moons Sect let out cries of surprise. They might have had incredibly high expectations for Su Ming, but none of them had expected that he would so easily clear the 13th formation that could be said to be a barrier that reached the skies. In fact, there were a few who instantly thought that Sect Elder Mu had intentionally done it. Only the disciples who had cleared the 13th formation of the fourth sky beyond the sky had solemn expressions on their faces. The scene when Su Ming had pointed the finger at the sect elder had made their hearts shudder. It was especially so for the head disciples who were in charge of the mountains. At that moment, their expressions were the most solemn. Clearing the 13th formation would mean that Su Ming had similar power to theirs. But the ease at which Su Ming had passed the 13 formations brought them great pressure. It caused them to be even more serious when they stared at Su Ming. In fact, even the head disciple of the second line, Chen Dao, who had already cleared 17 formations, opened his eyes at that moment. When he looked at Su Ming, a grim look that was rarely seen on his face showed up on his face. There was also Yu Yang, Lan Lan's disciple, who was also from the third line. She had cleared 16 formations, but her eyes were burning brightly right then. Su Ming had shocked her time and again. 14th formation, Su Ming called out flatly. He lifted his right foot and stepped down on the feng shui compass. A hint of expectation appeared in his eyes. He was highly expectant of the split he would experience during the 14th formation, which was equivalent to the split of his shadow in the 7 Lives art. Booming sounds shot up into the air and echoed when the 14th formation appeared. The feng shui compass on which Su Ming stood began shining rapidly. As it rotated, the light spread out in every direction. In the blink of an eye, the countless runic symbols squirmed and turned into multiple copies of Su Ming. Countless miniature versions of him had appeared around him at that moment. Soon after, a mighty pressure that caused even Su Ming to feel slightly uncomfortable descended with a bang. That mighty pressure felt as if the sky had collapsed and pressed down on Su Ming's body, causing his soul, his will, and everything in his body to feel as if they were about to be split apart. If it was any other disciple who challenged the 14th formation, they would have long since sat down cross-legged, circulating all his or her their cultivation base to fight back. But Su Ming only lifted his head and looked at the sky where the mighty pressure came from. Then, he swept his gaze across the figures of himself that were formed by the countless runic symbols. The pressure still isn't enough. It can't split another shadow figure from me. Su Ming frowned, and resolution appeared on his face. He lifted his right hand and struck the center of his brow. With it, a loud bang came from his body, and his cultivation base was immediately thrown into chaos. The pressure from the world around him increased, and the shadow under Su Ming's feet instantly started distorting. It's still a little lacking. A contemplative sparkle shone in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal before he tapped his chest. A cyclone was formed in his body, and it turned into a seal that sealed off 3/10 of his cultivation base. When he did so, the pressure from the world around him became stronger. It caused the feeling of his body being split to become stronger. One more time. Su Ming did not change the seal on his right hand. He tapped his dantian region, and the cyclone appeared in him again to turn into a second seal. Su Ming did not stop moving his right hand. When he brought it up, he tapped the center of his brow again. Immediately, the third seal appeared in his mind and soul. With 3 seals, he sealed off about 9/10 of his cultivation base, causing his body to tremble for the first time. The disciples of 7 Moons sect in the area had been keeping a close watch, and practically all of them were stunned by his actions. None of them knew what Su Ming was doing. Only Yu Yang's pupils shrank when she saw his actions. For the first time since the start, she stood up and strode towards the cliff to stare at Su Ming. A hint of shock appeared on her face. Just what level of cultivation does he have? This method is the exact same as the one that Fei Feng used for the 14th formation in the past. He had to seal his own cultivation base to have another shadow figure split from his body. She was not the only one who lost her composure. Even the pupils of Chen Dao of the second line shrank. He stood up swiftly, and while he did not walk out of his cave abode like Yu Yang, a hint of shock appeared on his face. In fact, Fei Feng, who was the strongest among the youngest generation of disciples in 7 Moons sect and who had stayed with his eyes closed as he meditated, opened his eyes a bit at that instant. They shone with a brilliant light. Wang Dao, he murmured. The 3 of them were not the only ones who reacted like that. The expressions of the 13 sect elders in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky and the hundreds of thousands of cultivators who were in the same generation as them changed. They began paying close attention to everything that happened to Su Ming. Either this person hid his level of cultivation, or his potential is unimaginable. What level of cultivation does he currently have? Could it be that he has already attained great completion of Avicania realm? The masters of each line sent word before that no one was to interfere or stop Wang Dao when he practices cultivation. A person who is so highly valued by the great sect elders. Even if he shows power belonging to those who have attained great completion of Avicania realm, I wouldn't be surprised. But Mu Zhen, you are the first sect elder to have directly engaged in a battle with him. Lay down your judgment. Great completion of Avicania realm. A cold harumph came from the 11th mountain. It belonged to Mu Zhen. At the instant the crowd's voice rose up in Seven Moons Sect's 5th layer of sky beyond the sky, Su Ming let out a low growl. As his voice echoed in the air, the shadow beneath him distorted and began overlapping. In an instant, the second shadow appeared under him. It was the shadow figure which Su Ming had separated at the start, but once it appeared, a third showed up the next instant. The third shadow was slightly blurry, but when it appeared, banging sounds came from Su Ming's body. Once all the seals were released, his cultivation base erupted, and the blurry shadow became clear. It instantly became complete. 15th formation. Su Ming's voice echoed and caused the entire region to tremble. At that moment, the night seemed to be over, and the first rays of light appeared in the distance. Chapter 1402. The Shadow of Winter. 15th formation. When those two words came out of Su Ming's mouth, the feng shui compass under him began rotating with loud bangs. Light from the runic symbols shone so brilliantly that it spread 100,000 feet right when the sun rose on the horizon. The light was so strong that it instantly reached an astonishing degree, causing Su Ming to become the center of attention in Seven Moons Sect. His two shadow figures appeared around him. When they became clear, they turned into his two selves standing beside his true self. At first glance, Su Ming's real self stood at the center, and by his sides were his shadow figures, which had power that did not lose to his real self. One looked at the sky, and the feeling as if it was looking down on the world was very strong. The other looked at the ground, and the spark of arrogance in its eyes was astonishing. The buzz of all the disciples from the 1st to the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky in Seven Moons Sect disappeared at that moment. A dead silence fell upon them. Yet soon, a commotion that was even stronger than before rose up like a loud bang. 14th formation. His second shadow figure has already split from him. This Wang Dao, as expected of the person known as the most prodigious in the past. No wonder he was taken in as a disciple of a great sect elder. No wonder he could become a sect elder. That's right. So that's how it is. This person's potential is so great that it's a rare sight in ancient Zong. He should indeed be a sect elder. Even if eldest senior brother Fei Feng and Chen Dao have already cleared more than 17 formations, they have practiced cultivation for years, while this Wang Dao have only joined the sect recently. They just can't compare to him. Just watch. In the future, Wang Dao will definitely single-handedly lead Seven Moons Sect to power. Wang Dao. You should be calling him Sect Elder Wang. The discussions rose and fell. Quite a number of inner sect disciples in the 4th layer were already talking about the future, and the Seven Moons Sect disciples in the 3rd line were even more ecstatic. Their initial grumbles had long ago turned into excitement. After all, Su Ming was an uncle master of theirs, and he had showed off just how astonishing his potential was. Yu Yang was silent, but when she looked at Su Ming, there was a challenging look in her eyes. She was not the only one who felt that way. Chen Dao had already walked out of his cave abode and stood at the cliff while staring at Su Ming. The threat Su Ming posed to him was incredibly strong, but it did not mean that Su Ming was his enemy, just a competitor in the sect. The path of cultivation is one in which we have to fight for power. He murmured, and the fighting spirit in his eyes grew stronger. As for Yi Long, he had already become numb. When he looked at Su Ming and listened to the rise and fall of the discussions in Seven Moons Sect as well as witnessed the changes of everyone's expressions, he no longer felt any anguish. He felt as if his blood had already become bitter. Su Ming did not bother about the various changes exhibited by the people around him. At that moment, he stood on the rapidly rotating feng shui compass, and he could sense the benefits it provided. If he worked together with his two shadow figures, his power would increase exponentially, and even though he still could not truly fight against those in Dao spirit realm, he would be able to protect himself. If he had enough time to refine his two shadow figures, he had a vague feeling that just by relying on them, he could perhaps reach Dao spirit realm. If I have 3 shadow figures, then the chances of me reaching Dao spirit realm will be even higher. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As the feng shui compass under his body let out loud, booming sounds, snow floated down. It was different from the previous one. It did not land on all of ancient Zong, but only appeared above the feng shui compass. When it fell, the chill coming from it was incredibly aggressive. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire area. Starting from the 15th formation, the shadows of the 4 great lines of nature winter, autumn, summer, and spring will appear. The difficulty of these 4 formations are incredibly high, or else Yu Yang would not have stopped at the 17th formation, and I would not have stopped at the 18th formation. Since ancient times, regardless of whether they were disciples who had disappeared in the passage of time, among those of the same generation in Seven Moon Sect, only eldest senior brother Fei Feng has ever succeeded in clearing the 18th formation and even cleared the 19th formation, said Chen Dao faintly as he stared at the snow falling from the feng shui compass under Su Ming while he stood on the mountain belonging to the second line. This Wang Dao might have great potential, but if I'm not wrong, he shows signs of coming to a premature end. I wonder, how many of the shadows of the 4 great lines of nature will he come to understand? What do you say, Yu Yang? Chen Dao smiled faintly. When he spoke, Yu Yang slowly walked out from behind him to stand by his side and looked at Su Ming. The 4 seasons have shadows, and they are known as the shadows of nature. The real self in 7 lives art is the first life, and that is human life. The second and third are earthen lives. Once they split from you, they can receive earthen aura from the human life and fade away. The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th lives are heavenly lives. They must be understood from the 4 seasons. Once the 7 lives are formed, they fuse together to become the first Dao shadow. Only then can we be considered to have completed the first stage of the strongest art in 7 Moon Sect 7 Shadow Dao, Yu Yang said calmly. 7 Shadow Dao, even if just 1 Dao shadow appears, we can already be considered to have entered the first level of Dao divinity realm, and if the real self is already in the first level of Dao divinity realm, we can be considered to have reached the second level. Chen Dao smiled faintly. His words were calm, but when he spoke, he shook his head. I have my reasons for giving him this reminder. What about you? Yu Yang did not speak. While on the feng shui compass, Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the second mountain. Over there, he saw 2 figures that had spoken words at a volume that could reach him. 7 Shadows Dao. A contemplative look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He slowly sat down on the feng shui compass, and the other 2 shadow figures beside him did the same. The 3 of them began to meditate. Time trickled by, and more snow floated down. The cold grew stronger while the darkness completely faded away, overtaken by morning light. The sun had begun to rise. 4 great lines of nature. Legends have it that there were 4 great divine abilities during ancient times. We have gained several styles, so I wonder whether this Wang Dao will be able to gain an epiphany of them. Chen Dao smiled, but when he looked at Su Ming, a grim look appeared in his eyes. Yu Yang continued remaining silent. Time passed, and gradually, the sun lifted its head. A new day arrived. Su Ming had intended to end his challenge when dawn came, but right then, he changed his mind. The rune provided quite a great help to him, and since he had already begun challenging it, he might as well challenge it to the limit of his abilities. When noon arrived, more snow appeared on the feng shui compass, and it had already covered half of Su Ming's body. He still did not open his eyes, however. Hidden under his eyelids, his eyes sparkled with the light of deduction. They seemed to be reflecting an epiphany only he understood. Snow has its own shadow. It is faint under the sun, but if anyone looks carefully, they can see it. If I want to clear the 15th formation, it is not difficult. As long as I can find the shadow of the snow and gain an epiphany of it as well as gain an understanding of all manner of beings having shadows, I will be able to control the shadow in the snow. It would be the same as me gaining an epiphany of the clue hidden in the 15th formation. But I don't like daylight. Dusk gradually came, and at the instant the setting sun was about to disappear, Su Ming opened his eyes. The sun set, and the world fell into darkness at that moment. Su Ming, with his eyes open, slowly brought his right hand up. My life matrix had always been one of moving from midwinter to spring that brings about life, one of moving from death to life. The snow of winter symbolizes death as well as the midwinter of my life matrix. Using winter as the 15th formation? It's something I can easily clear, but I don't want the shadow formed when snow envelops the ground while it is day. What I want is the shadow when night envelops winter. This shadow is not the shadow of snow, but the shadow of winter. Judging by the looks of it, this Seven Lives art doesn't really suit me that well. The light from this art is too strong, and it is at its strongest when it is used during day. At night, shadows are hidden, and it is at its weakest. What I need, what would really suit me, will be the Seven Abyss art that I will create after I modify this art. Once I perfect it, the shadow of the land during night will become my shadow. A strong, dark light shone in Su Ming's eyes. At the instant he lifted his right hand, he did not go on to grab the snow floating down. Instead, he swung his arm, and his sleeve seemed to manifest above him, to cover the sky. As booming sounds reverberated through the air, the snow floating down instantly turned black. It was not that its color had changed, but that it was dyed black by the night, and that included all the snow around Su Ming. Once it was dyed black, Su Ming slowly stood up. Shadow of winter. At the instant he spoke, the snow in the area let out a loud bang and spread out from the feng shui compass. It fell from the fourth layer of sky beyond the sky. At the same time, the black snow that existed in the fourth layer also appeared in the third, second, and first layers of sky beyond the sky. For the first time ever, black snow floated down in the first 4 layers of sky beyond the sky in 7 moon sect. Su Ming lifted his head. Right when he looked at the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky, booming sounds shook the sky and earth, and his black snow floated down in the 5th layer too. All of 7 moon sect was silent at that moment. Chen Dao stared at the black snow floating down before him in a daze. He instinctively brought his hand up, and when the snow landed on his palm, he felt a stab of pain. He lowered his head, and found that he was not looking at snow. It was the shadow of a small portion of the night sky reflected on the snow. Yu Yang's face was pale. When she lifted her head, Chen Dao too looked up at the night sky. It seemed to have shattered to pieces and turned an innumerable amount of black snowflakes. They fell on the land of the living, but they were not snow. Instead, they were the shadows of the sky. Fei Feng, the head disciple of the first line in 7 Moon sect who meditated all year long, opened his eyes at that moment and walked out of his cave. He lifted his head calmly and looked at the sky. At that moment, the sect elders in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky were also staring at the sky. Their expressions were solemn, and a hint of shock appeared in the eyes of some of them. Dao Han, the red-robed man who owned the whole 6th layer of sky beyond the sky, stood at the top of the mountain belonging to the 13th line at that moment. When he looked at the sky, his pupils shrank at the sight of snow falling in the 6th layer. With his level of cultivation, he managed to gain an epiphany of a divine ability belonging to Dao's spirit realm. This person is indeed extraordinary, the red-robed man said softly, and a solemn look appeared on his face. Chapter 1403, Darkness of Spring. It's a pity that this art is just in Dao's spirit realm. If it can reach the state at which could affect Dao paragons in the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky, this person would reach an incredibly terrifying level. The red-robed man shook his head. At that moment, there was a small region the size of a fingernail no one could see in the sky above the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky, right on top of the rune formed by the 12 great sect elders. It seemed like it was about to start snowing. While standing on the feng shui compass, Su Ming slowly lowered his head. When he swung his right arm, the snow in the 6th layer of sky beyond the sky disappeared without a trace. Even the feng shui compass on which Su Ming stood lost all traces of cold. But for some unknown reason, while Su Ming stood there with a straight back, he gave off a feeling as if he had fused with the night. It seemed like he was the night. The power of this art is somewhat all right. Su Ming closed his eyes. After some time, when he opened them, he used his right hand and pushed down on the feng shui compass beneath him. 16th formation. He had been challenging the rune for a day and a night. The gazes of the disciples of Seven Moons sect had been on him for all that time. He had started from the first formation and made his way straight to the 15th formation. This left all of the Seven Moons sect disciples shocked. He had completely crushed the contemptuous gazes directed at him, and the only things remaining was shock. His act of clearing the formations had even caught the attention of the sect elders in the 5th layer of Beyond the Sky. Even Lan Lan had already walked out of the palace where she meditated to look at him. The matter of clearing 15 formations in one go seemed to be something they had not seen for many years. Something similar had happened at some point in time, but those who had seen it had long ago disappeared in the passage of time, and the ones who remained were the people in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Shadow of Autumn. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. At the instant the rune rotated with loud rumbles, he lifted his right hand and swung it against the sky. As the feng shui compass rotated, the dark sky instantly turned red. The red replaced the darkness of night, dyeing the sky the color of fire, but it was not fire. It was the color of autumn, the color of blood. A faint feeling of life withering appeared as well. It was a desolate feeling. At the same time, the feng shui compass seemed to have turned into a huge tree. Its leaves were falling one by one. There was no wind, but each leaf symbolized life force. As they fell, they seemed to show how all manner of being had to walk towards death and nothing could be done to change it. Su Ming was silent. At that moment, he seemed to have turned into the big tree. The falling leaves did not just bring with them his life force, but also his memories and all that encompassed his life. What an art, this art of autumn's shadow. Su Ming said softly. But the autumn I like is not the shadow under the setting sun, but the quiet withering in the night. This is the shadow of autumn that I seek. At the instant Su Ming's eyes sparkled and understanding appeared in his eyes, the red sky was dyed black and turned purple. It grew more prominent until the sky turned black again. The autumn tree Su Ming had manifested was also instantly enveloped by black, as if it was hidden in the dark. No one could see the tree leaves falling, but soon, all the plants and trees in all mountains from the 1st to 6th layers in Seven Moons sect sky beyond the sky started withering. It happened in an instant, so no one was aware of it even a breath before it happened, unlike how they would notice the autumn leaves under the setting sun slowly floating down to the ground. Autumn at night came in an instant. Night was eternal, and the illusory tree disappeared. Su Ming stood in its place with his purple hair drifting in the wind. At some point in time, he opened his eyes to reveal a darkness in his eyes that the night could not dye black. 17th formation. At the instant Su Ming said those words, Seven Moons sect, which had already been sucked into the situation for a long time, immediately burst into an astonishing uproar. Sect Elder Wang has cleared the 16th formation. He's already reached the same height as eldest senior sister Yu Yang. That's not the main point. Sect Elder Wang's epiphany is clearly different from other people's. The snow from before and the black light now gives off a feeling as if we're swathed in darkness. It's a ghastly feeling, and even if it's not cold, you can still feel chills down your spine. If he can clear the 17th formation, it will mean that he has surpassed eldest senior sister Yu Yang and reached senior brother Chen Dao's number. And only eldest senior brother Fei Feng would remain in front of him. The sounds of discussion rose everywhere, but among the expectations of the many people were also some that held envy and jealousy. Those voices were rather different from those of the rest of the crowd. He has clearly reached his limit. The 17th formation might be the highest number he can go. HMPH, even if the 17th formation isn't his limit, it's impossible for him to surpass eldest senior brother Fei Feng. The eldest senior brother stopped at the 20th formation, and he is an existence we all look up to. It's impossible for this person to do so. Most of those voices came from the disciples from the first line. They did not want to see Su Ming surpass Fei Feng, even if Su Ming had the status of a sect elder. As their voices echoed, the feng shui compass under Su Ming activated the 17th formation. The rumbles as it rotated drowned out all sounds of discussion in the area for the time being, causing the people to gradually stop speaking. Instead, with differing expressions, they looked at Su Ming. This should be the shadow of summer. When Su Ming said those words faintly, the The 17th formation's rotation made it seem as if a sea of fire had stirred up in the night sky. It formed a huge sun. That sun did not hang high in the sky, but instead enveloped Su Ming and the feng shui compass within it. While the night sky remained dark, a sun hung high over 7 moons sect. It was summer's line of nature, and also the summer of the 17th formation that the disciples were required to understand. 2 hours later, the fire turned black. The piercing sun also turned black. The black fire brought with it a powerful presence that could burn everything. It seemed to be burning light and exuding darkness, so the black fire fused with darkness, and the black light penetrated through the 6 layers of sky beyond the sky. When the sun disappeared and Su Ming's figure appeared on the feng shui compass, his voice echoed in 7 moons sect, and it was as calm as before. The 18th formation. At that moment, Su Ming had already surpassed Yu Yang and reached the same number as Chen Dao, but it was clearly not his limit. He wanted to surpass the 17th formation and head to the 18th formation. Winter, autumn, summer, spring. Spring. I have never come to an understanding of it when I was in harmonious Morus Alba. Right now, I have already reached a state where I can gain an epiphany. My life matrix will also be completed at this moment. My 4 shadows of nature will also appear. A sparkle that had not appeared for a long time showed up in Su Ming's eyes. He sucked in a deep breath, and when the feng shui compass rotated and all manner of being was about to be resurrected, he sat down cross-legged on the feng shui compass. The shadow of spring. At the instant Su Ming said those words calmly, the feng shui compass on which he stood filled with thick life force. The abundance of it caused Su Ming to instantly appear a little younger. Spring was the resurrection of all manner of being. The abundant life force was also spring. It was the first season among the 4 seasons, and also the final grid in Su Ming's life matrix. He once strived to gain enlightenment of it for a long time, and at that moment, on that rune, Su Ming finally found a hint of spring, but the price he paid for that enlightenment was too great. He had experienced too much anguish and sadness before he understood what was spring. My dark mountain has become an illusion. My 9th summit is buried in the long river of my memories. My berserkers have turned into a mark in the passage of time. My homeland, my true world, the arid triad expanse cosmos to which I belong have now all turned into nothingness, destroyed. I was born in an expanse cosmos formed on a wing of harmonious Morus Alba, but now, harmonious Morus Alba has died, and everything has turned into the past. I lost my family, my senior brothers, my elder, and my loved ones. I lost everything. I lost the bald crane and the most precious and valuable things in my life. I feel as if I had lost my soul. While I was in the summer of my life matrix, I never managed to gain an epiphany of spring, and instead, I regressed to midwinter. It is the chill of death, what can send my soul to eternal sleep. It is a morning hidden when I sink into the darkness. I like darkness and am willing to be immersed in it because only when I am in darkness can I let my sadness melt. Only in darkness can I not see my surroundings, but can be in a daze and remember all the faces in my memories. And I, at this moment, have finally come to understand why spring is so far from my grasp, why my life matrix could never be completed in harmonious Morus Alba's universe, because the true meaning of spring is a cruelty that can only bloom after I die. Spring is the so-called resurrection of all manner of being. I thought that my life matrix is of walking from death to life, but in truth, it encompasses everything. If I don't die, then how can I be resurrected? If I don't have the aura of death, how can I have life force? That is spring, and my spring will be the life force in the dark. It will be the shadow of spring that blooms from my life matrix. At the instant Su Ming's eyes flew open, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. With it, the world roared. The darkness of night descended and enveloped the feng shui compass, hiding the abundance of life from spring in the darkness, and no one could see it anymore. My spring is hidden in darkness. Be it life force or resurrection, it will all be in darkness. They will either wake up or fall asleep, based on my will, because regardless of whether it is spring, summer, the red of autumn, or the snow of winter, all of you have to be in my dark night. Su Ming stood up swiftly, and at the instant he did so, besides the 2 shadow figures by his side, 4 other indistinct figures appeared around him. They were his spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the four great shadows of nature. I will not clear the 19th formation. When Su Ming got up, his words traveled through 7 Moons sect. He then flew up from the feng shui compass and charged toward the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Behind him, the night sky disappeared. Dawn broke through darkness, and a new day arrived. Chapter 1404, One Dao Sect. Su Ming's departure left all of 7 Moons sect in silence. His figure seemed to have turned into an astonishing wave that crashed into them before the sun broke through the darkness. He disappeared from the crowd's gazes and stepped into the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Clearing the first formation straight up to the 18th formation in one go was something rare in the history of 7 Moons sect. At the very least, most of the 7 Moons sect disciples had never heard about such a thing before. It could be said that the 1 day and 2 nights was a shock to the 7 Moons sect disciples, and it etched Wang Dao's name deeply into their minds. As for Yi Long, when Su Ming started clearing the formations, he was a green leaf, and Yi Long was a flower, but once Su Ming cleared more than 10 formations, Yi Long became a background for Su Ming. By the end, however, he did not even deserve to be his background. In the 4th layer of sky beyond the sky, Chen Dao and Yu Yang stood at the edge of the cliff. When Su Ming left into the distance, they gradually turned their heads away. He could have continued, Chen Dao said slowly after a long while. There was a very grim look on his face when he looked at Yu Yang beside him. Fei Feng also had the power to continue once he cleared the 19th formation all those years ago, but he did not, Yu Yang said softly. When she turned around, she walked into the distance with light footsteps. While on the cliff, Chen Dao narrowed his eyes. After a long while, he swung his arm, then turned around and walked back to his cave abode. Fei Feng had walked out of his cave abode and stood outside his door at the top of the mountain belonging to the first line. He moved his gaze away from the disappearing feng shui compass with a thought-provoking smile on his lips. Looks like you've also noticed. I wonder if I will be the one who will be moving into the distance, or you will be the first to gain the epiphany, Sect Elder Wang. As Fei Feng continued smiling, a fierce glare appeared in his eyes. When daylight returned and the sun shone on the ground, 7 Moons sect welcomed a new day. Su Ming sat outside his house in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky with his eyes closed. 18 formations were not his limit. If he wanted to, he could have cleared the 19th formation, the 20th formation, and even more. Based on his level of cultivation, he could probably clear up to the 22nd or 23rd formation. But Su Ming did not. After the 18th formation, you must clear the subsequent formations with a Dao shadow. Even if you manage to clear them, you won't be able to get any sort of serendipity. It'll just be an empty name. Only after I form my own Dao shadow will I be able to gain an epiphany from the rune. A dark light shone in Su Ming's eyes. That person called Fei Feng must have also noticed this, which is why he did not continue once he cleared the 19th formation. Clearly, he still hasn't formed his Dao shadow. And 7 Moons sect's Dao shadow can only be formed with the fusion of 7 lives art. While he thought about it silently, Su Ming remained with his eyes closed. What he needed to do next was to go through a long period of isolated training. It is necessary to fuse his human life, earthen lives, heavenly lives, and 7 shadows together and attempt to turn them into a Dao shadow. Then, once the Dao shadow was formed, he would see whether it could be used to help him reach a breakthrough in his level of cultivation and reach Dao spirit realm. Time passed, and another 10 years went by. During them, Su Ming remained meditating and did not open his eyes. He was immersed in the fusion of his human life, earthen lives, heavenly lives, and 7 shadows. He did not pay any attention to things around him. During the process of gaining his epiphany, he only searched for the key to the fusion. In that time, some not incredibly great events happened in 7 Moons sect, such as some disciples disappearing without reason and the signs of the sky shattering occasionally appearing above 7 Moons sect. The cracks might close up quickly, but gradually, they caught the disciples' attention. When 10 more years passed, the frequency at which the sky above 7 Moons sect shattered increased. Cracks gradually formed high above. There was also a faint rumbling noise that rose and fell, echoing in the air. In fact, the strange events reached the point where they affected the training of the 7 Moons sect disciples. At that moment, sect elder Mu brought many disciples of the sect to venture out of sky beyond the sky to investigate the matter. No one knew what he discovered, but when he returned, he went to the 6th layer of sky beyond the sky, and then, he never went out of the sect again. When another 10 years passed, the cracks above the 7 Moons sect filled the entire area. Even the ground was covered in them, which meant that mountains in 7 Moons sect had also cracked. Once it happened, the disciples of 7 Moons sect began to pay a lot of attention to it. Eventually, when another 10 years passed, the cracks in the world beyond 7 Moons sect grew so great that all those who saw them were shocked. In fact, the 7 Moons sect itself and the mountains around it were also covered in cracks, and it looked like they were about to collapse at any moment. The first layer was not the only place that looked like that. Even the 2nd layer of sky beyond the sky had cracks, and once it happened, the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky held a 7 Moons sect's council of elders. It was a major event in which all sect elders were required to participate, and as a sect elder, Su Ming would naturally have to attend it as well. Su Ming had been in isolated training for 40 years, and during them, he had not opened his eyes once. It was the first 7 Moons sect council of elders in over 40 years, and a jade slip was sent to all sect elders in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Once it levitated in front of him, Su Ming still remained with his eyes closed. However, an overlapping shadow seemed to have appeared on his body, and immediately after, a figure moved out of his seated body. That figure was one of Su Ming's shadow figures. It had the exact same appearance as him, and once it stood up, it picked up the jade slip levitating in front of him. Then, as composed as ever, it headed to the mountain belonging to the 13th line. Since Dao Han was in charge of the 13th line, the 13th line was the head of the sect while he was in charge. Su Ming was the last to arrive. At the instant he stepped into the 13th line, he saw several divine senses sweeping towards him from the mountain. They all had the intent to observe. With a calm expression, Su Ming walked to the top of the mountain and stepped into the meeting spot for the Council of Elders in the 13th line. It was a field at the summit of the 13th mountain. Above the clouds surrounding the mountain were 15 huge chairs that formed a ring. One of them was slightly smaller than the other 14 to show the difference in status. At that moment, besides the largest chair, 13 people already occupied 14 chairs. The one remaining was clearly for Su Ming. When he walked forward, 7 pairs of eyes in the silent meeting hall immediately looked at him. Su Ming had seen everyone before when he first stepped into 7 Moons sect. One of the people was Mu Zhen, and another one was Lan Lan. Su Ming's expression did not change. He treated the gazes as if they did not exist. He slowly sat down and closed his eyes as if he was resting. Soon after, a huge, mighty pressure descended onto the meeting spot. The moment Su Ming opened his eyes slightly, he saw a fire-red figure appear on the largest chair. The fire-red light gradually turned into a long robe wrapped around a middle-aged man. The man's face was cold, and he held a pearl in his right hand. His expression was awe-inspiring. Once he sat down, he swept his gaze past the 14 people around him. When he saw his disciple, a young man in black robes whose face was as cold as Hish, nodded slightly, and when his gaze landed on Su Ming, his eyes lingered on him for a moment. I gathered all of you here to attend the 7 Moons Sect Council of Elders because the preordained fate governing the world has become increasingly stronger. There are certain things that all of you will need to prepare beforehand. Sect Elder Mu, tell us what you found 20 years ago when you ventured outside, said the red-robed man while playing with the pearl in his hand. My fellow sect members, 20 years ago, by orders of the great sect elder, I went out to investigate this matter, and in the cracks of the world, I found signs of one Dao sect. Mu Zhan said darkly while he swept his gaze past the group. At the instant one Dao sect's name tumbled out of Mu Zhan's lips, the expressions of 5 changed swiftly. Dao Han and Mu Zhan were not among those. I knew it. It's one Dao sect. Only the unfathomable one Dao sect who can exist in all cracks in the world can show themselves so publicly and arrogantly beyond 7 Moons sect. When the cold voices appeared, Mu Zhan wrapped his fist in his palm towards the red-robed man and stopped speaking. Since you noticed the signs of one Dao sect a long time ago, why did you wait for 20 years before you told us? Lan Lan asked coldly in a faint voice. The moment she spoke, the council members immediately stopped speaking and turned their gazes towards the red-robed man. Because one Tao sect has sent a notice while living in the cracks formed in the world outside, or rather, instead of saying that it's a notice, it would be apt to say that it's a threat, the red-robed man said calmly while toying with the pearl in his hand. Then, he glanced at Su Ming. In their notice, they very clearly told Seven Moons sect to hand over all the disciples they took in the last 2 cycles of 60 years. If we don't, they will launch a war against us. At the instant the red-robed man said those words, besides Su Ming, all the people's expressions changed drastically. One Tao sect has gone overboard. What a joke. How can we hand over our disciples? Those people are nothing, but Seven Moons sect is one of the 7 sects. If they want to use this to threaten us, how are we supposed to face the other sects in the future? One Tao sect might be the strongest sect among the 7 sects, but they can't force us like this either. Cold chuckles from the sect elders in the area appeared at that moment, and the red-robed man spoke slowly. Of course, if we agree to their request, one Tao sect will reimburse us, such as providing us the experience of those who have stepped into Tao spirit realm from the 2nd level of Tao divinity realm, and a chance to gain an epiphany to become a great Tao paragon. Once that sentence was said, the expressions of all the sect elders changed due to the temptation. They did not say another and instead sank into silence. The entire council of Seven Moons sect became quiet. Chapter 1405, or Fight. If that's the case, then it's not as if we can't agree to it. After all, one Tao sect is incredibly powerful, and it's said they have a great Tao paragon. In fact, I even heard that one Tao sect's creator is one of the 3 great Tao gods. The 3 great Tao gods are just a legend. Besides the emperor of ancient Zong, no one has seen a second one, but even though it's just a legend, it's impossible for it to have sprung out of nowhere. Forget whether there is truly anyone in the 9th level of Tao divinity realm, since there is less than 30 people in the whole of ancient Xianxia 7 sects, the 12 clans, and the royal capital who have reached the 8th level of Tao divinity realm. Compared to the near 67th level Tao paragons, great Tao paragons are an existence akin to heaven itself. Great Tao paragon. If the great sect elder of Seven Moons sect's first line had not been injured in the past, he might have already become a great Tao paragon. Su Ming did not speak, but as he listened to the sighs of the sect elders around him, he came to realize that there was no great Tao paragons in Seven Moons sect, and there were less than 30 great Tao paragons in ancient Zong. Then the blue-robed cultivator in the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky is clearly in the 7th level of Tao paragon realm. Su Ming was deep in thought, but he knew exactly why the leader of the 7 sects would want the disciples of the last 2 cycles of 60 years. They might be looking for me. A barely noticeable glint shone in Su Ming's eyes. This matter has already exceeded the scope that we as the sect elders can discuss. Great sect elder Dao Han, I wonder if you have already made your decision, Lan Lan said after being silent for a long while. She was not the only one who thought like that. In truth, all the sect elders were old monsters who had practiced cultivation for many years and were very calculative people. They had intentionally said the words before to affect others. They would not voice out their own true thoughts. The red-robed man was silent for a moment before a fierce glare shone in his eyes. At the instant the sect elders noticed it, their expressions became stern. One Tao sect has given us the terms for the exchange. No matter what their goal is, it's not like we can't do it. But there are 2 people involved who cause me a bit of trouble. One of them is my disciple, Yilong. He has extraordinary potential. After coming under my tutelage, he will soon become someone outstanding. As for the second, it's sect elder Wang Dao. When the red-robed man said those words, most of the elders in the area looked at Su Ming. In truth, all of them had thought of this problem before, but the matter involved a sect elder, and since Su Ming did not seem like he was sometime kind-hearted, it was only natural that no one said anything about it. Su Ming remained as composed as ever. His face was very calm, and he did not speak. If that is the case, then we cannot relent in this matter. Besides sect elder Wang, all other sect elders, I order you to leave the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Bring your disciples along and guard the 13 corners of Seven Moons sect. Only call for the members of the same line as you. They might not be sect elders, but they have extraordinary power as well. They can serve to defend our sect. Notify the disciples from the fourth layer of sky beyond the sky that they are to patrol our sect. As for those in the first sect, the outer sect will be sealed off. I will personally act as garrison and activate the 7 Moon Snow sect. This is not child's play. All of you, take care of yourselves. If you run into any danger you cannot fight against outside, immediately hide on the rune. As for Sect Elder Wang, since there is a possibility that you are the person One Dao sect seeks, please continue to remain in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. Unless it is absolutely necessary, please do not go out. Su Ming was stunned. He lifted his head and cast a deep glance at the red-robed man. In silence, he remembered the person dressed in the sky-blue Daoist robe. That person had decided to take him in as a disciple right after seeing him and given him the status of a sect elder. Then, even after being under One Dao sect's pressure, the red-robed man had made the decision to fight. No matter what their goals were, their actions still made Su Ming slowly get up in silence. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to the red-robed man. The red-robed man remained calm after seeing it. His expression did not change in the slightest. He only nodded before he shifted his gaze to the pearl on his palm. He remembered his conversations with the 13 great sect elders on his trip back to the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky. All orders are to be executed immediately. The red-robed man stood up while saying that and swung his arm, which broke the seal covering the field they used for the meeting. When the group, including Su Ming, turned into long arcs and flew out, only the red-robed man and the cold, black-robed young man by his side remained. Master, I do not understand. It's highly unlikely that One Dao sect came for junior brother Yilong. Chances are high that they came for sect elder Wang. The young man frowned and looked at the red-robed man. I know, the red-robed man said after staying silent for a while. Then why? The young man asked, feeling rather worried, while looking at his master. He still remembered that sect elder Lan Lan had mentioned that his master and Wang Dao's life matrices clashed against each other, and the forms showed signs of death. This is a decision all the 13 great sect elders, including me, made together. This person is the most valuable person in 7 Moon sect. The red-robed man was calm as ever. When he spoke, no one could tell how he felt from his expression. The young man fell silent. He sighed in his heart, then wrapped his fist in his palm, bowed to the red-robed man, and left respectfully. Once he was gone, the red-robed man stood alone on the mountain and quietly stared into the distance. 7 Moons sect can fall, but nothing must happen to him. These are the words of the great sect elder of the first line. He is the key for him and the other great sect elders to become great Dao paragons. He is also the key for me to become a Dao paragon. The red-robed man had expectation in his eyes. When he turned around, he disappeared into the hall. Once the sect elder flew out of the mountain belonging to the 13th line, they turned into long arcs and returned to their own mountains in the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky to carry out the orders from great sect elder Dao Han. As for Su Ming, he traveled with Lan Lan and returned to the mountain in the 3rd line. They never spoke to each other. However, when they were about to return to their cave abodes, Lan Lan came to a stop. Do you want me to tell a fortune in regards to your survival? I don't believe in destiny. Su Ming turned around and walked to his house on the cliff. When he returned to his real body sitting in the house, he overlapped with his real self.
Lan Lan fell silent.
When she turned around, she went back to the palace on the mountain. Soon after, as all of 7 Moon sect roared, snow fell down and covered 7 Moon sect. Then, a sun made of ice appeared above. Within the icy sun, a figure could be seen. It was the red-robed man. Once he rose with the sun, snow filled with a grim air enveloped 7 Moon sect. At the same time, a loud bang shot up from within the 1st layer of sky beyond the sky. The entire outer sect was instantly encased by ice and snow, sealing the mountain. The 7 Moons sect in the basin was covered in a layer of snow, without a single hint of what was within being able to be seen. Soon after, 13 long arcs flew out from the 5th layer of sky beyond the sky. They left the mountains and walked out of the sky beyond the sky, spreading into 13 directions within 7 Moons sect. Those 13 directions were the areas where there were the most cracks in the world. Similarly, a large number of inner sect disciples ventured out of the 4th layer of sky beyond the sky and started to patrol 7 Moons sect as if they were preparing for something. Only Su Ming remained sitting in his house, immersed in fusing with his 7 shadows. He could already sense the signs of fusion. With just a little more time, he would be able to fuse his 7 shadows together and turn them into his Tao shadow. Time passed, but even after bringing out a tight defense for 3 years, more cracks appeared beyond 7 Moons Sect. On one rainy day in summer, while snow fell in 7 Moons Sect, a sound that was even louder than the average volume of a thunderclap rang out. As it echoed in the air, countless cracks appeared in the sky beyond 7 Moons Sect, and it looked as if the sky was about to collapse. The cracks immediately formed a huge picture in the sky. It was the outline of a statue. Needless to say, it was one of the 3 statues belonging to one Tao sect. Once its outline appeared, loud bangs came from the ground. As huge ravines rose and fell, it seemed like 7 Moons Sect was surrounded by all the cracks in the world. At that moment, an ancient voice echoed in the world. Point 1. The voice only uttered a single word, but astonishing howls came from the ravines. As the howls rose and fell, multiple figures shot out of the cracks. At first glance, they seemed to have flown out of the ground, but in truth, they had come from the cracks. Those figures had cold expressions on their faces, which gave them a grim and murderous appearance. The moment they showed up, they charged at 7 Moons Sect. Tao! When the second word came, the sky tumbled about. A dozen figures instantly descended from the crack that formed the outline of the statue. Each of those figures exuded an ancient presence. After they appeared, they charged at 7 Moons Sect. At the same time, the 13 sect elders who defended 7 Moons Sect opened their eyes. Their bodies vanished, and when they reappeared, they were in front of the dozen-something figures. Booming sounds echoed in the air, and they kept those people back. Immediately after, the 7 Moons Snow Rune was activated. If anyone looked at all of 7 Moons Sect at that moment, they would find that it looked as if it no longer existed. It was enveloped by a huge layer of ice, snow, and whirlwinds that shot into the clouds. From a distance, it looked like an ice dragon was roaring at the world. Sect. The voice echoed in the world again. When it said the third word, booming sounds from the air in front of 7 Moons Sect being torn apart rang out, and a huge ravine which was millions of feet long appeared in the air. That ravine looked to have been torn apart by invisible hands. At the instant it was torn, a black wind dragon filled with cracks charged at the ice, snow, and whirlwinds. Hand over all the inner sect disciples from the last 100 years, or we will fight. If you want to fight, then we will fight. In the whirlwind, a face showed up at that moment, and it belonged to the red-robed man.